see you. You and I have never had the opportunity to do the Rebel's Edge together. We got John on the road somewhere. He's somewhere flying across the world, but whatever he's doing, he's not able to do it. So it's great to have you with me, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, me too, Pete. I'm so hyped. There's so much to talk about today, so I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, we've got some great stuff. Why don't we just jump right into it? Because I think we've got some exciting things to talk about here. How about we start off with the macro minute, which is where we always start. The macro minute for me today, you look at China, right? And you look at all the different factors that are there. They've got an outlook that maybe was a little different than a lot of us were expecting. And that certainly had an influence, I think. You take a look over at the FXI, that getting hit a little bit today. China is going to be something that will influence our markets. There is no doubt about it. But as far as today, so far the markets are kind of taking a pause on that China stuff, and they're looking at everything here in the US of A.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to be nice about it, Pete. China sucks. China hasn't been investable since the sweeping antitrust actions in 2021. I bet the Chinese government wishes they had a time machine right now. On July 16th, we got GDP data out of China that was like 4.7%. Sounds good, sounds like a lot, but it was actually under expectations. Really took the wind out of Chinese stocks. And you say 4.7%, that's not so bad until you realize that a third of their entire GDP comes out of the real estate sector, and that sector is burning. The house is on fire, Pete. It's not a good look. In June, the price of secondhand homes in China fell a record amount year over year, minus 7.9%. It fell in all 70 surveyed cities. It's been falling since 2020. I have to imagine that investing in Chinese stocks is like sleeping for your first night in prison. You're just constantly like looking over your shoulder, and just about any event that takes place is probably unwelcome. Bad news.
I hope to never be that guy on his first night in prison.
Me neither.
All right, let's just jump over to the fantastic futures. The fantastic futures, to me, I'm looking at the 10-year treasury right now. And why I'm looking there is, that's been a huge influence for the markets. And let's just take a look. Okay, the start of July, we were at about 4.5%. Now, all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, we look at it and we've been steadily underneath that level. And now we're trading somewhere just north of 4.2. So I like what we're seeing there. I certainly think that's a huge influence for the markets. And as we've watched that kind of steady kind of push to the downside, we're seeing a market that's had some really great days. Yes, there have been pullbacks, but some really great days.
Yeah, exactly. And that really leads into my fantastic future. And I'm not going complex here. We're actually talking about the ES, which is really just the SPX future, because I think that there's this huge misconception that brews every time there's any amount of pullback. All these bears start coming out of the woodwork. You got Harvey Dent and all of those types of people, as well as Mike Wilson from Morgan Stanley, Marko Kolanovic, people who have been underwater forever, coming out and saying, now, this time, here's the top. It's the top this time. I know I've been saying that for a long time, but this 3-day downtrend, this is the top. And when you zoom out, you see that we're in a weekly uptrend. We're in a monthly uptrend. We're in a daily uptrend. Personally, I think that this is an opportunity for everybody who's been looking at this rally since November and saying, oh, it's clearly going up. It's so good, but I don't want to buy the top. It's rallying so much. I don't want to buy it up here. It's overbought. Well, now we're coming down a little bit. So here's your test. Your metal is being put to the test. Will you buy dip, or will you fall victim to these bearish inclinations yet again?
Yep, I'm with you on that. All right, let's just jump into our stocks because I'm really excited about what we've got in front of everybody today. General Motors. Now, this is a stock, we talked about it on the open. When you look at the earnings, they absolutely crushed it. I mean, they did what people would want to do, right? They got 306, they were looking for 272. Then you look at what they did from a sales standpoint, $47.9 billion. They were looking for $45.3 billion. That's a monstrous number. Then you look at the guidance. The guidance was raised up. Then you look over at the stock and you say, well, wait a minute now. The stock actually had a nice pop. The next thing you know, it starts to drop. Why is that? Well, there were other things that were positive as well. They talked about cash flows and everything else, but there were a lot of concerns about what's going on. And we talked about at the top, what's going on in China, right? And on top of that, not only the autonomous cars and that type of thing, but actually the money lost that has been going on right now over there because they're looking for growth, right? We're always looking for growth and expanding that growth. And if that's not actually happening right now, which it's not in China, that is an issue. So that's probably, I would say, at least a good answer for why that stock had that nice pop to the upside, kind of dropped down. And oh, by the way, year to date, up 38%. I'd say this stock has actually been performing very, very nicely so far. And it's not part of the seven. Oh, imagine that. It's not part of the seven, Justin. Can you believe it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sometimes people try to put these headlines on big moves. You see on CNBC right now, it's GM slows its EV plans, and that's why they're down. And I think you have it way more correct. When something rallies so much so fast, the stock market's looking forward to the future, and we're looking at, a big growth driver like China. And we're saying, oh, okay, can we actually derive the same amount of growth out of this corner of the market that we thought we could? Oh, maybe not. Maybe that's some people's reason to sell. Personally, like you said, I think we're up plenty. And I don't think that this pullback is so bad for the health of the stock.
No, and it's not all that far off of the 52-week highs, which is over $50 a share. So it's right there. It's had a great run, and then there's just a little bit of worries about what's going on over in China because, of course, it's just like Starbucks putting their Starbucks over there or whatever. You're looking for that growth somewhere else, and they're just not getting it right now. NXPI, I think this one's pretty interesting because they are very much exposed to the automobile world, and we just got done talking about GM. They missed their outlook. You can't miss your outlook. That's just one of those things that no matter what it is, you can have great numbers that are there for the quarter. And you look at that and you say, wow, that was fantastic. We did this. But as you know, and we talk about this all the time, it's always looking forward. The market is always looking forward. And they missed on the outlook. So that's a major problem. It has had a great run year to date, but today, it's down about 9%, down close to $257, something like that. It's gone from 220 to over 290. This is a stock that's had a really nice run, but in one of these days, maybe they'll actually start mentioning AI. I don't know. Maybe they should. Maybe they shouldn't. Everybody in the semiconductor world does. But for right now, this is an automobile world problem, and that's why it's getting hit pretty hard today.
Yeah, and I think you really said it well. Like if you look at Nvidia, if you look at like the, names that have branded themselves as AI, they're a world away. Nvidia's down 0.2%. It's not really being impacted nearly as hard by NXPI's drop. So this could be sort of an isolated story that relates more to what we were talking about in GM. I don't really think it's a huge reason to panic and sell all your semis, but just like with GM, the semis as a whole have been moving as one big unit to the upside and driving the market higher. So it's not surprising to see some deviation there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, that exposure, certain areas are definitely hotter than others, and that exposure to automobile certainly is a problem. Next up, we've got Spotify. Now, Spotify, we were talking about this before we even started today and the interest, and we were talking about it with Jared and the whole crew. We were kind of kicking this around. They crushed the earnings. They crushed with the profits. They crushed with the revenue. The other thing that they crushed with is the monthly active users. That was up 14%. I mean, you look across the board, and whether we thought that or was going to happen or not, and I was probably in the camp of, well, I don't know how much growth that they've got. That's impressive growth. You look at their subscribers, the premium subscribers, they got 246 million of those. So for this stock to be up 12%, it seems justified to me. I mean, I look at this one and I say, wow, this thing has been on an absolute tear to the upside. It's at 52-week highs. It's not that far away from all-time highs, which is saying a lot because Spotify had a great run a few years ago, but it's not that far away from that either. So I look at this one. Is it a little bit overpriced? Probably. But nonetheless, you look at these numbers and the numbers add up to exactly what we're seeing, which is a stock that's absolutely exploding to the upside today.
Yeah, exactly. It's cool that they're really holding the gap higher. A lot of times you see these, gap up and fade or gap up and fade a little bit, even in really bullish scenarios. But with Spotify, I think the story is really, where else are you going to go? Where else are you going to get your music? There are cooler ways. You could get a big record collection. You could get some CDs. You could go back to illegally pirating music on LimeWire. But most people are kind of done with all of those worlds for their general music listening. And that means they're going to go to Spotify and they're either going to get the membership or they're going to keep hearing more and more and more ads. And they keep lacing them in, believe me, anecdotally, like every other song. So
Yep.
they've got ways to turn those gears.
Yep. Well, and we've seen that work on the video side as well, right? With the folks that are willing to have the commercials to pay a little bit less and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's exactly the same thing. Our next one is kind of interesting, kind of funny to me because it's UPS. Now, if you want the trifecta of how to disappoint folks, this is what you do. You do just follow UPS. Here's what they did. They missed on their earnings. Check. They missed on their revenue. Check. They cut their guidance. Check. That right there, that is the trifecta. That is why this stock is hitting 52-week lows today, 125.80, I believe. It might break through there even and establish even further lows, but down about 13%. This is a company that, it used to be years ago so well run, but it hasn't been well run for quite a long time, in my opinion. And they're kind of paying the price. But this is one where, should you catch a falling knife? I don't think so. I think you got to wait for this thing to show us that they can start being more profitable. They can actually hit the earnings that are out there. They maybe can hit the revenue, and maybe they'll have a good outlook. But right now, the trifecta looks very, very negative for UPS.
Yeah, and if you want to make it a four-peat, you can look at the support at like 132.50, just not even coming close in the we gapped so far below that, Pete. It's crazy. In the Rebel Roundup, shameless plug, we said at 145 there's way more space to the downside. It's like a descending triangle pretty firmly, and now we broke it way below that. So you got to start looking at really, really old supports to even find a spot where you could maybe buy this. I don't even think I would buy puts in it. It's just too much of a chaotic story that you probably want to watch settle out. Maybe this says something good about the deflation story that we're hearing broadly, especially in combination with the housing that we're seeing, the housing data as well. But, for UPS in general, yeah, what a bad performance.
Yeah, they just tripped all over themselves. They couldn't get themselves back up, and man, it was awful. All right, man. So we're going to jump to sports, and I know that you have some sports that you love, probably some that you don't. Whatever, everybody's got their thing. But if you're following the Olympic basketball team at all, and this is the true dream team, right? I mean, every year or every time it comes around with the Olympics, I should say, there is a new dream team. And it's not the same old dream team that we had where they're literally blowing people out. They're putting 60 points on them. I mean, they're literally winning by the other night. They were favored by, I think it was either 44 points or 48 points. It really doesn't matter because they won by 1 point. I mean, this is really kind of interesting to see. And it maybe makes it that much more interesting to watch maybe during the Olympics, but they had an issue with Germany where they really just could not get the ball to drop from 3-point. Finally, Steph Curry hit one, I think, of 7 with 3-pointers. And then you had South Sudan out there as well, right? Now, let's be honest. Germany, yeah, there's a few players from the NBA there. South Sudan, maybe somebody. But these are games where folks that are looking at it are saying, you know what, the dream team is just going to blow these guys out. And it's not happening. I don't know if it's Steve Kerr as the coach, and he's doing some sort of, he's a big believer in that whole rest thing, right? The management and all the rest of it. I don't know what the deal is, but so far these don't count. But the closer we get to the Olympics where this really does start to count, this is kind of concerning. What do you think about this right now? Because this is 2 in a row where we're like barely winning the game, and that's not what men's basketball for the Olympics should look like.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, it's cool because you got LeBron. He's 39, and that's like 1,000 in NBA years. And he's still coming up, and he's still leading the team. But yeah, you're right. Like the rest of the world's starting to catch up, and it's a far cry away from the days of Bird and Johnson and Ewing and all those real stars that all these guys probably look up to from the past. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what it means for the future of sports, but hey, at least it'll be a more competitive game here going forward. At least it's not just going to be the Globetrotters versus whatever team the Globetrotters goes against.
The Washington Generals. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. No, it is amazing. I mean, I am shocked by it. The days of Michael Jordan and Bird and all these guys, I mean, it was blowout central, and they had fun, and they were just showing the world how dominant they were. That's kind of flown away for now anyway. But it just shows you also that basketball is a sport that has become global, and the rest of the world is catching up in a hurry. So I think you got to give them a little bit of credit for that. That's phenomenal. All right, next up, the NFL. Now, I played in the NFL. John played in the NFL. I loved it. You know, there were times where the NFL, for people who don't know the history, it was 12 games. They moved it to 16. They moved it to 17 games in a single season. And now Roger Goodell wants to make it 18 games. Now, just so everybody fully understands this, when you sign your contract, it's not for playing in 17 games for the season. It's playing for the season. So if they add a game, it's not like these guys are adding money to their purse or whatever. They're not. This is just what you get per season. So it actually, in some ways, is actually cutting back what they're making per game when you really look at it from that perspective. My thing is this: 18 games might be too many. I almost think right now 17 might be too many. And matter of fact, the NFLPA, the Players Association, they really pushed back on the 17 games. Now they're really pushing back on the 18 games. Roger Goodell wants to push this thing through. All they want is money, money, money. They got television. That's where it all is. What do you think about this, Justin? Is this just the NFL getting more greedy every single year, or at least every couple of years, and stretching how many games these guys are playing?
Yeah, I think you said it best. And I mean, it makes perfect sense that you did. You're the expert on this topic. But yeah, I mean, they're probably looking at Netflix, booking some deals, and they're saying, how can we squeeze a little more money out of this sponge? And in the process, you know, what are you going to get? You're going to get more injuries. You're probably going to get more upset players who don't really want to be adding these extra games for no reason. You know, it's potentially damper on the exclusivity of these games as well, that force you to wait and prepare and force all the hype and all the commentary that you can drive around it, and everyone gets really excited. The more games you start to add, the more you kind of take away from how special those games are, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you. I mean, you know, the more games, more is not always better. And I think that they're making a mistake. And I even think the 17 was a mistake, quite frankly. But 18, you know what? It's just that much more opportunity for injuries as well. And obviously, you know, they can sell it. They can sell it to the advertisers. There's no doubt about it. That's why they're doing it. But I just don't think from a player's perspective this makes any sense at all. And I'd be pushing back if I was one of those representatives, for sure. All right, folks. Well, thank you, Justin, for joining us on the Rebel's Edge. It's really been great. Let's always remember, everybody, it's not an option. You got to watch this every day. You got to get into the options world and understand with all the things that are going on in derivatives. And I can tell you, it's been an absolutely crazy month in July. When I look at the volumes, you look at some of the volatility, and it had been in the 12s. We got all the way up into the 17s. We've pulled back now into the 15s, but the volumes have been extraordinary. So It's Not an Option, that book, you're definitely going to want to check that out. It's not an option.com. Until tomorrow, maybe John will be here, maybe not. If he's not here, Justin, we'd love to have you back, man. Look forward to it. Take care. Have a great one.
Have a great day.